Caitlin, are you hearing music or?
Nope. I'm in my own little world over here.
Yeah, that's completely fine. We go along with that too.
All right. Speaking of being in your own little world, I think I mentioned it before, but I bought like one of those Oculus Quest VR headsets.
Oh, goodness.
That is amazing. That is amazing. The planetarium program that they were talking about yesterday with the Night Sky Network called Big Astronomy. They are streaming that in live it's streamed live. It's a recorded planetarium show, but it's in 360 degree. And so one of the apps in Oculus Quest is YouTube 360. And so you get, I can't wait. I can't wait to see the program in 360. It's going to be cool.
Oh, wow. Did you ever hook that up through your telescope yet?
I did. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I would love to see that.
Yeah, it's definitely well worth it.
I bet.
Sorry to have some viewers checking in. We got Richard Grace and Bergman Scooter, Pekka from Stockholm, Eduardo Simone, aloha. Martin Eastburn, I'm awaiting the wind to calm, so I might open my dome to do some work and some play. I now have this. Yay. That rhymed, Martin. That's good.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, Richard, you should definitely look into the Oculus Quest. Hafez Mirza is watching from Malaysia.
Last time you had somebody from Malaysia, they had gorgeous skies.
Really? You were there?
No, on what was that?
That's right. That was
that was the Grand Conjunction, wasn't it?
that was the Asian edition of the Global
Yeah.
Star Party. Yeah.
That they had amazing skies.
So David, are you getting some good observing in Arizona? Or has it been cloudy or?
No, it's very clear tonight. I'll be out for a little bit this evening, although the moon is starting to come back.
Mm-hmm.
That's what David says every time. He's always saying there's clear skies, not where I live, I'll tell you.
I think we all need to move to be next door neighbors to David Levy.
I could do that.
Do that too.
We're all getting confused on time zones today. This is time zone day.
It's Twilight Zone day.
Yes.
Let's see. So today is the 15th. And right now they say that Uranus is stationary.
Huh.
Oh.
My dog keeps coming in to keep me company.
Nice. Tater.
Yeah, Tater's just walking out the door. She has a way of coming and nudging my arm as soon as I get on there and try to speak, and I'm trying to keep her.
Oh yeah, that's right. Pay attention
Without...
to those humans. Pay attention to me.
That's it.
Right.
Is she a member of the league yet?
She's an astro dog, yeah. She keeps me company every time I'm out. If I go out the door, she has to go out right before me.
Martin says, I'm clear in Central Zone, Texas, and the wind is blowing 20 to 30 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
The dome won't open for me now.
God, I was observing in very cold weather with high wind about a week ago.
Uh-huh.
And as I'm sitting at the telescope, I'm on a tarp that's locked down with tent stakes.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, the north end of the tarp, both of the metal tent stakes flew at me like bullets, hit the telescope, and the entire tarp rolled over the top of me and the telescope.
That's not a good night, was it?
Not good. Yeah,
That's a sign.
that's a sign. It didn't stop me.
I know you're
a challenge, right?
You know, in my old astronomy club, we would have called you an Astro Viking. You know,
Yeah.
It's like rough and tough. They can stand anything. You know, so.
Well, last year I did 11 hours and -2. So
Wow.
Wow, you are definitely an Astro Viking.
just have to
-2.
dress for it.
That's not Celsius either, is that?
Well, that was -2 standard bulb temperature Fahrenheit. Yeah,
Ugh.
that's my record. I don't want to repeat it or break it.
Eduardo said that's a microburst. Oh, I guess he's experiencing a microburst. He says it's time to go.
Oh no.
I'll be right back.
Okay.
Some water.
Scott, did you get the address that I sent you? You wanted my Astro League address?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever respond back to that? I wanted to make sure it was coming through okay.
I would say no, I didn't. Let's
Okay.
see. Hold on. Oh, wait a minute. I see that from your personal address.
Yeah. For some reason, that's what it's set up, I guess, to go through my personal address. That way it comes right in through my email.
I see. But if I reply to it, it's just going to, I'll reply. It's going to go
Okay. Check the email that has that email address within it and do it that way.
Let's see if I can do it.
I tried to email myself and I couldn't get it to work. I know, Carol, you had used that email address and it worked fine.
So it should work for everyone, really. I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, I couldn't send it to myself, or at least it didn't seem to send to myself.
I just sent
Okay.
it to the secretary
Okay.
address.
Okay. I'm
So,
going
I think
to
the
check
problem
that.
before, because I also tried to use it and I couldn't make it work. So
Oh, really?
yeah. So there may be something in your forwarding or something like that that's stopping
That
it.
could. Okay.
You get John Mitchell on that.
Yeah, actually, I have the email from Scott. Yeah.
James, the astrophotographer looks like I might get an hour or so break in the clouds after 8:30 to 9 Eastern. I might actually get to see some stars tonight. It's raining right now, though.
Oh.
Martin says, I just watched a YouTube that showed La Palma under a heavy snow and the dome is frozen closed.
Oh my gosh.
My kind of weather.
Yeah.
That's right. Now, Chuck, do you like cold weather?
I like the long winter nights. Get a ton done. They're
Yeah.
11 hours of darkness. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to take advantage of them. Yeah. Every now and then, I had one night not long ago when I was just totally overwhelmed with frost. I mean, it was everything but icicles hanging off the telescope.
I've had that before too.
Now that is determination.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it was a bit of a test for the heaters.
I'd like to find one of those electric suits that the guys at Mount Wilson and Palomar used to wear. I think it was, I don't know if they used them at Mount Wilson, but certainly at Palomar they did. Brad says, yeah, Chuck, but the skies have to be clear.
Well, yeah, that's a bit of a problem in winter.
James, the astrophotographer, says they are great when they are clear. I'll wear multi-layers.
I was in Cleveland in a mall one time walking in the middle of the mall, and I looked over at a store and I saw a coat hanging in the window. It was a full-length down coat with hood.
Yeah.
And I said to the people I was with, "Excuse me, I'm going to go buy that coat now. I'll be right back." I mean, I didn't even ask. The minute I saw it, I knew it had to be mine. It is fantastic. You simply cannot get cold in it.
Are there earthquakes on Mars? Or rather, Marsquakes? Quakes on Earth happen many times a day, largely due to continental plates shifting as they float on the mantle below. That's called plate tectonics. Mars doesn't seem to have plate tectonics, but other things can make the ground shake too, like cracking caused by contraction from cooling, magma moving and creating pressure deep underground, or even meteorite impacts. Quakes of any kind send seismic waves around and through the planet. Scientists can study how those waves bounce off layers deep underground to help understand what a planet's interior is like. NASA's InSight lander carries a super sensitive instrument to measure Marsquakes and could detect dozens of them during its mission. Each one can tell us a lot about what's going on inside that mysterious red planet, maybe about how all the rocky planets came to be.
That was a nice brief little introduction there.
Yeah, wasn't it? Yeah, it's perfect.
I like that.
So everyone, thank you for tuning in tonight. This is Scott Roberts from Explore Scientific and the Explore Alliance, and we are here joined with the Astronomical League, and this is their second program, the Astronomical League Live 2. And we have a great lineup of people here already. With David Levy, Terry Mann, who will be co-hosting this program with me, Libby and the Stars. John Goss is here with us from the Astronomical League. Chuck Allen's here. Our keynote speaker, Caitlin Ahrens, is here, and the president of the Astronomical League, Carol Orge. And so it's excellent to have you guys on tonight. Again, I love these programs, and I love all the just the variety that the Astronomical League brings to our community. So it's awesome. We always start our programs, almost all of our programs. In fact, I think every one of our programs with David Levy. David shares his passion, his love for the night sky, his love of literature. Poetry, and the emotions that only poetry can evoke about the night sky, and and the astronomers' love for it. So no one does this better than David, and we are so lucky to have him. David, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Scotty, and welcome everyone to the Astronomical League Live number 2 event. I think number 1 event was yesterday, and it was it's been a very interesting time for those of you who living somewhere on Earth. It's been a very tough year, and we're all hoping for an improving year in 2021. For those of us living in the United States, it's been a difficult start for the new year, and we're also very much hoping that the next few days will be peaceful, and that then we'll be able to go back to enjoying the night sky. And even before that, to go outside and just watch the stars come out is something that I really treasure, something very special. And I think I have to do that because when I was a kid, I was going to be a professional astronomer. I was going to do well in math and physics. So I went to McGill, where I flunked math and I flunked physics. And I failed pretty much everything with the possible exception of English literature that I didn't do too badly in. Went to McGill again and did the same thing. Then I went to Acadia, switched my study to English literature, and did very well in that. And then at Queen's, I was able to get a master's degree. And then just recently, I got my PhD, also in English literature, at the Hebrew University. So the poem that I was told that there's no way to get into astronomy through English literature, but I was able to prove that wrong, because I think there's a very easy and fulfilling way to reach for the stars through the poetry and prose of English literature. Tonight, my quotation is going to be, I think, of all the 100-odd quotations I have in my book, which is right here, of all the 100-odd quotations that I have in this book, this is Wendy's favorite. And Wendy, if you want to come and read this with me, I'll be happy to do it. It is from Ralph Hudson's The Song of Honor, published in 1913. And imagine that you're standing on top of just a light hill, a small hill, looking up at the night sky. I stood and stared. The sky was lit. The sky was stars all over it. I stood. I knew not why. Without a wish, without a will, I stood upon that silent hill and stared into the sky until my eyes were blind with stars, and still I stared into the sky. Thanks, and back to you, Scotty.
I've heard that poem many times from you, and you always deliver it so nicely. It's awesome. Okay, so next I would like to introduce someone that this week needs no introduction because she's been on with me all week long. Terry Mann, who is the secretary of the Astronomical League. Terry is a former two-term president of the Astronomical League and someone who's made the better part of her life, I think, devoted to the League, well, at least to amateur astronomy and to getting people of all ages, especially kids and girls, with a focus on girls getting involved in science and astronomy. Terry has put together some amazing events for the League, and she's an adventurer, one of the most, I would say, truly a brave person. She is someone that is adventurous and has gone to great lengths to witness nature in all of its splendor, including going out to photograph aurora, like you see, like a shot of hers behind her right now. So it's, I'll turn it over to you, Terry. Thank you. Thanks for allowing the Explore Alliance to present the Astronomical League live programs.
Well, thank you, Scott, for doing that. We are really happy to be here. And David and Wendy, thank you very much. You tell Wendy hi from all of us, and thank you both for reading that. I love that. I just like Caitlin, as soon as you started, she just looked right up there. You know what is going to happen. You know which direction to look. So thank you, David. Welcome. Oh, you're muted, David. Okay. All right. I would like to introduce the president of the Astronomical League, Carol Orge, which has held many offices, done many things with the League. Another person that has spent many, I won't say many years, has spent years too involved in astronomy and with the League and outreach. you'll find out a lot of the people of the league do that. And as I'm sitting here, we have one current president and 3 past presidents sitting here, which is kind of unusual to see all of us in one group, unless we're at Alcon at the banquet. So it's great to have everybody here. Libby and Caitlin and everybody, thank you for being here. And Carol, I think I will turn this over to you and let you go ahead and give a little bit of an update on the league.
Thank you, Terry. Good to be here. Thanks, Scott, for setting all this up. David, I always enjoy your comments. He's getting to be almost a standard fixture at our local club meetings once a month as well. So
Oh, that's good.
Never get tired of hearing about it. Who would have thought a year or so ago that we would be spending so much time on Zoom? And yet, I know several of our individual clubs, and of course the league included in that, thought, well, with the pandemic happening, we can't do anything. We've got to stop. Not so. I am so impressed with the ingenuity people in this group have worked with and established, including Scott, because we've constantly come up with new ways of doing things. In many ways, we're reaching a lot more people than we ever could before. Yeah. And so I think it's going to be long-term a very good thing for us. In fact, just today, I got on official record there from John Goss that we are, the Astronomical League is on YouTube. We have our own channel as of today. And so I would encourage everybody to go out there and check us out. And there's already a post, thank you, John, of the benefits of the league, many of the benefits. And I see this as a real good platform to work on in the future. That was one of my goals earlier in the year, was to make sure we expanded our presence in yet another area. And I think that'll be most beneficial. So in addition to John being responsible for that as media officer, he's also, since he didn't have anything to do, took upon the project of the 75th anniversary celebration, agreed, didn't have to twist his arm too much to head that up. And we're really appreciative of that, John. It's amazing what we have found out as Chuck Allen, Terry, and others have dug into the history of our organization and looked at the giants who came before us, whether it was former officers or youth who were instrumental in making the league what it is today. So it's we're very appreciative that we're going to celebrate that this year. In addition, we are very privileged to have been on for about 4 months now with Scott's Global Star Party. That's been extremely helpful in expanding our reach as well as Explore Scientifics. And it's really something that's helped immensely.
Thank you, Carol.
Sure. I'd like to say just a little bit about our national convention coming up, scheduled for the first week in August. As many of you know, I don't think any of us are under a rock and do not realize that we have a pandemic worldwide. However, we're still very optimistic that that first week in August, we will be able to meet in Albuquerque. And we may have to do some creative things in order to make things happen. It probably won't be a convention like we've had before, that's strictly speakers on site. There'll be probably a combination of several things, but we would invite you to stay tuned on that. We'll have more information as it becomes available. As I was talking to Terry about who would be a good speaker for this event, the name that immediately came out was Caitlin. And I was looking back in the records, it does not seem possible that it was 10 years ago that you won the Horchata Award. I don't remember what the location was for Alcon that year, but can't believe it's been 10 years, but well done. And here you are, freshly minted PhD. How good does it get? Recently, we made the decision that our website, the league website, needed a little help. So we're coming along nicely on that to expand the capabilities for streaming on the website as well as our other platforms. So we'll keep you posted on that. We've been very encouraged by all of the people who have stepped forward willing to help with that effort. And I think it'll pay off. Holidays have got us a little behind, but we're getting there. And let's see, I probably will forget some things, but oh yeah, the one I had at the top and I looked right over it. Thanks to Explore Scientific and Scott Roberts for taking up the mantle for the Imaging Award. We had a sponsorship from OPT for several years on that one. It's going to take us a while to get the everything ironed out with that and make it a manageable program. But since we're expanding it beyond the scope of just having award winners and that sort of thing, it's going to be on a little bigger scale. So we want to get it right. So we'll have a well-oiled machine when it actually is announced. We hope to announce that in the first half of the year. And Scott, again, that is such a nice contribution. We appreciate it very much.
It's a real honor. It really is.
And let's see. I think that's about all of my comments for right now. I don't want to take away from any of our other speakers from the league side. Chuck will be talking about our various award programs, and he'll go more in depth on that. And John will be talking about our 75th anniversary. So I'll turn it back to you, Terry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Appreciate that update. I am going to explain a little bit about what we're going to do next. I'm going to share my screen and bring up we're going to give away 3 door prizes tonight. And they will be 3 Astronomical League calendars. And if you've watched the Global Star Party, we do it a little bit different on the Global Star Party. You will send your answer to secretary@astroleague.org. And what I want to do is do the 3 questions now, and you will answer them not online, but to that email. And then after Caitlin gets done speaking, I will announce the 3 winners. So that way, get your answers in as soon as you can, because when she starts, we will definitely be going over winners. So we will have them figured out after she gets done. So as I said, tonight's door prizes are 3 league calendars. And these are fantastic calendars with a lot of information. And all of the proceeds, the revenue, will go to Alcon Jr. for the kids. So this is the first question. What is a green flash? Okay. Next question. What are the NGC numbers for the open cluster known as the double-double Imperseus? Okay. And the last question, what is the common name for the main object that winds through IC 1396 in Cepheus? Now, send your answers, as I said, to secretary@astroleague.org, and we will announce the winners after Caitlin is done. So I am going to now turn this over to Chuck Allen. And Chuck Allen has been president of the league before. He is current vice president, and he is a master observer. If you want to know something about the sky, Chuck knows it. As some of them heard him talking earlier, he has spent many hours out under the stars. And Chuck will be speaking about our observing program. So Chuck, I am going to turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I do have the privilege of talking about something that I believe is one of the major benefits of league membership, which is our very robust system of observing awards. And so if I can share a screen now, I'll begin that process. Hold on 1 second here. Oops, wrong one. 1 second, please. Okay, there we go. Our programs have been in existence for a long time, as you will find out very soon. But before I talk about our observing programs, I'd like to mention something about the ways that amateur astronomers observe, because not all of it is visual. One of our past presidents, Barry Beeman, has made 20,000 variable star estimates. That is his passion. Jim Fox, our 2014 Peltier Award winner for doing photometric work on the atmospheres of Neptune and Uranus. We have young people like Karen Lay here who won the National Young Astronomer Award in 2020 doing radio astronomy research into an X-ray source that had not been determined before. Many of you remember the Reverend Robert Evans, who discovered 42 supernovae using a 16-inch reflector and, of course, his amazing card catalog that was legendary. We have 600 asteroids that were found by amateurs working out of Farpoint Observatory in Kansas, something that's now being supplanted, unfortunately, by satellites. We have sun-grazing comets and comet discoverers. And David Libby, who's with us tonight, is one of the most legendary comet discoverers in our midst. And we're so pleased to have him with us always. He's a great supporter of the League historically. Unfortunately, comets too now seem to be falling into the purview of satellite discovery. Many of you in the amateur astronomy community engage in public outreach, which is key. And if you're doing that, keep it up. And of course, astrophotography has risen to new levels with CCD cameras. Here's an example of an 8-inch telescope image taken by a member of my club in Evansville, compared to one taken with a 322-inch telescope. So, stunning,
really
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But what if you're interested in visual observing? What if you're interested in going out and not observing the Ring Nebula for the 430th time? You need some structure. You want to see new things. You want to be challenged in what you're pursuing. You want to learn from this. And boy, this can do it. The League's Observe programs structure your observing in ways that I never even imagined possible. And I'm going to show you some numbers here, and I'm not trying to impress anybody. I'm trying to show you how stimulating these programs can get, because they have led me through 37 programs to over 6,360 observations in my lifetime. And most of those, as you will see later, have occurred in the last couple of years. So let me talk a little about these programs. We have over 80 observing programs in the Astronomical League. They provide each a list of projects or observations that have to be completed, usually about 100, some as many as 400, some 50 or 60, depending on difficulty. Most of these are PIN programs. You receive a certificate in PIN for completion, and you receive national recognition for it. We have over 80. By comparison, the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, which is a wonderful organization, has only 7 and only 5 PIN programs. So this is the most robust system of observing awards in existence. It started back in 1967 with the award of a Messier Club certificate to Catherine Delaney in 1967. Since then, we have given out 16,140 awards to over 5,600 different people.
Wow.
These are the folks who run our observing programs. Dr. Aaron Clevenson, Dr. Alan Purdy, Lieutenant Commander Cliff Mygat, and Dr. Maynard Pittendray is the Executive Secretary of the League currently. Aaron is essentially the head of the whole ball game, and the work he does is absolutely stunning. I don't know how he keeps up with it all. He is responsible for monitoring the activities and answering questions and keeping everyone on track, running all of these 80 programs. That's quite a few scores of coordinators. And I am a coordinator of 3 of these programs, so I know how much work he does and that they all do in keeping these programs afloat. You learn a lot from pursuing these programs. You're not just looking at things. Our Open Cluster program, for example, asks people to engage in the process of determining the detachment and the Trumpler classification of open clusters. Our Globular Cluster program asks people to estimate the Shapley-Sawyer concentration of the globular clusters, for example. The Alternate Constellation program, which is brand new, asks people to examine constellations that were invented in Europe and then have since become defunct, or constellations in the mythologies of different civilizations around the world: Aboriginal cultures, Pacific Island cultures, African cultures, South American and Latin American cultures, and Native American cultures in the United States, and also Asian cultures. For example, the Shoshone saw Betelgeuse and Rigel and the three belt stars of Orion as three boys in a canoe fishing with a line extending to a fish that they were not supposed to catch, the Orion Nebula. And because they caught this forbidden fish, they were cast into the sky as a warning to others to obey tribal laws. And down in the lower left, at the southwest corner of Libra, is my personal favorite defunct constellation, Buffo the Toad. So there's a lot of interest to be had in studying those. We have 3 lunar programs. They're very accessible to people in cities. The Lunar Evolution program is our newest one, and once again, very educational because it asks the observer to observe 57 different features on the moon and to estimate the geological epoch, one of 6 geological epochs in the moon's history as it relates to that particular feature. We have a Dark Sky Advocate program in which people study lighting, determine different kinds of lighting which are favorable and unfavorable to astronomical research and observing, the legal issues surrounding it, the effect on wildlife, and sky quality determinations around the country. And you see how badly it's deteriorated just since the 1950s. The Stellar Evolution and Carbon Star programs key you to a point in recognizing color in stars that you never imagined you could have. Most people think they just see blue and white, but once you do these programs, you start seeing colors you never dreamed of before. You become more sensitive to it because it asks you to do that. Our solar system program covers a variety of topics, from eclipses to Jovian satellite observations, to comets, to Mars albedo features, outer planets, sunspots, a wide variety of projects, some of which take 6 or 8 weeks to complete. Multiple observations of Venus phases, for example, is one of them. We have sunspot and H-alpha programs for solar observing, which of course demands a great deal of care and interest in filter usage. We have a bright nebula and a dark nebula program. Some of the members sometimes refer to the bright nebula program as bright nebula that aren't and dark nebula that are, but they're a little tougher than they may seem. We have many programs now oriented toward high resolution observation of double stars, multiple stars. These are very testy, require good seeing conditions and an understanding of the ability to observe at high resolution. We have a comet program. We have also a multitude of galaxy programs, which are my personal favorites. They start with the galaxies in the Messier catalog and the Caldwell catalog and move on to the Herschel 400 and Herschel 2 programs, which have 400 objects each in them, mostly galaxies. And the rest are pretty much all galaxy programs, 2 in the view, local galaxy groups, active galactic nuclei, which are quasars, Via Lacerti objects, and northern and southern R programs. The southern R program was a big challenge for me here. I finally finished it, but you're observing 13th magnitude galaxies on the deck. It's very low, and so forth. So these are all great for the galaxy hunters in the midst. The Planetary Nebula program requires a lot of understanding of use of filters. And our Visual Meteor Observing program requires reporting, official reporting, and learning how to do that, how to evaluate the type, color, speed, train, and magnitude of meteors when observed. We have also, of course, a variable star program and a binocular variable star program and a NOVA program, which require reporting to the AAVSO. And getting involved with them is a very positive experience because you're contributing directly to the science of astronomy when you do this. One of the advantages of pursuing these programs is it tests your limitations. One night I was observing with a 12-inch at Patoka Lake. It was a dark site. I was after a Herschel 2 object, NGC 499. This is not the sketch did not copy well. The contrast is way too high here, but the galaxy was here. As I observed it, I noted another galaxy over on the other side of the field, NGC 496, and it was just a little smudge moving with the field as I moved it to get a better handle on the shape and structure of 499. And while I was sketching it, I noticed a little tiny smudge that was moving along between them, which turned out to be NGC 498, which was listed initially at magnitude 16.0. It's actually 14.3, but that's a test in transitional rural skies for a 12-inch. And so it makes you much more attuned to seeing extremely faint objects with whatever telescope you're using. These programs push you to the very limits of your capability with a telescope. And you don't need a 28-inch Dob to do these programs. As I said, I've completed 37 of them using nothing larger than a 12-inch. So these are very accessible programs, and many of our programs require only binoculars or sometimes naked eye observation. Again, these are some of the pins that are awarded along with the certificates that we give out. They're beautiful. They make a nice collection, and they look nice on a wall. You also, if you complete a program, your name gets recorded in our Observing Awards section of our quarterly magazine Reflector, so you get national recognition for your observing work. We have also become the organization that assigns master observer status to people who complete certain required programs and certain numbers of programs. Master observer status is achieved by completing 10 programs, including 5 core programs, which are the Messier, Binocular, Messier, Lunar, Double Star, and Herschel 400 programs. Once you complete the basic observer requirement, you can move on to advanced observer, which is a total of 15 programs, including 5 additional cores taken out of a list of 17. Master silver, which involves 20 total programs with 4 more cores. Master gold, which is 30 programs with 5 more cores, and master platinum, which is 40 programs with 5 more core programs required. We recognize our master observers with plaques at our convention if they come to the convention to pick it up. Very nice to have. We also have a program to recognize those who educate others. Our Master Outreach program has 3 levels for 5 events of 2 hours each, Stellar Outreach at 60 hours and Master Outreach at 160, plus a narrative about your experience with teaching other people astronomy. I'm only showing you this, the number of objects observed per year in my lifetime, to show you the benefits of getting started in earnest with these observing programs. I did this, I was taking care of family members for a number of years, and then in 2018, started into these observing programs and got hooked. And you see the last 3 years have greatly eclipsed any prior year in my life in terms of observing. So they really do hook you, become quite addictive. And that means you're sometimes out in conditions you'd rather not be out in. But you have to take advantage of those clear nights when you get them, whether it's -2 degrees or not. Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of paperwork to do, but it's amazing how much learning goes on when you go back to log your observations or you plan your observations in advance, because one of the things you learn when you get into our observing programs at the higher level is that you have to plan before you go into the field. You have to know what you're going after and where to find it and what you're looking for. Some of them are challenging, and if you go just without that information in hand, your success rate drops substantially. I show this picture. I used to do a lot of mountain climbing, and when people look into the face of a Herschel 400 program or a Herschel 2 program with 400 objects, they think, there's no way, I can't do it. And what I tell them is the same thing I used to tell young people that I took on mountain climbs. I said, do not look at the summit. Look at the 50 feet in front of you. Worry about that. And just keep doing it 50 feet at a time, 50 feet at a time, and all of a sudden the mountain melts away and you're on top. And that's the way these programs work. So don't be intimidated by the number of objects in them. You will get there. We have a number of advanced programs that I have listed here. I have the Herschel 400 and Herschel 2 in a slightly different shade because they're not necessarily difficult. It's just that there are a lot of objects, 400 in each of those programs. Some of the other programs are quite challenging. Flat Galaxy is very difficult. The NEOs are difficult. The Advanced Binocular Double Star program is surprisingly hard. The Planetary Nebula program requires 110 observations out of a possible 110. So you have to be very vigilant in pursuing those. And some are quite faint. The intermediate programs we have are these cluster programs, the lunar programs, solar system, sunspotter, variable star programs, and so forth. And they are interesting, they're fun, and not brutally challenging at all, but time consuming. You have to work at them. But we also have a number of novice programs that are of particular interest to young people getting started. And here are a number of them. Again, some of these do not involve a lot of telescopic work. Some do. Some involve only binocular work. We have a Master Binocular Observer Award now for people who complete 8 out of 9 of our binocular programs. There are only 9. So if you complete 8 of these 9 programs, then you achieve Master Binocular Observer status with the Astronomical League. We also have a new thing, a Master Imaging Award. And what we're doing here is asking people to image all of the objects in particular programs that are listed here. You see the list. Generally, you pick one from each of these lists and do a complete photographic survey of that particular program. And finally, I'd like to show you a couple of the programs that we think are really good for young people getting started in astronomy. The Sky Puppies program gets people started with identifying constellations and the brightest stars, has people observe 5 deep sky objects, sketching Jupiter or lunar crater, identifying the North Star, and getting started with logging. The Beyond Polaris program does similar things. It teaches star party etiquette, logging skills, and makes a general introduction to a wide variety of different objects in the sky. Our Universe Sampler program over here on the right begins to teach people to star hop using charts and to complete the observation of 2 object lists. 2 of them are naked eye, or you can do 1 naked eye and 1 with telescope and binoculars. With telescopes, you can start challenging what generally is the first program that people do with a telescope, and that's observe 110 Messier objects. Very accessible to young people with their first telescope. We have a Constellation Hunter program to identify and sketch 39 constellations. We have a Messier binocular program requiring people to observe 50 Messier objects with binoculars, which gives people a wonderful idea of the scale of these objects in the sky. It also requires good chart usage. And finally, we have a lunar program that requires observation of 100 lunar features, 64 of which can be done with the naked eye or with binoculars. And so those are, that's our observing program regimen in summary. And at this point, I will stop share. And I believe Scott will turn this over to a young person who can tell us how she got started in astronomy and maybe with observing. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, sure. That's my pleasure. The person I'd like to introduce is Libby. We call her Libby in the stars. Libby is I think she's still 10 years old at this time. Is that right, Libby?
Actually, in December I turned 11. So
you turned 11. Okay. All right. So, well, that's awesome. It's a great time in a young person's life. Certainly, I remember those years too, and that's when I was really intensely interested in astronomy and just space exploration in general. So I totally get you. Libby has for a young person, I think, has really stepped it up. She has intense interest in the stars in all aspects too: nebula, planetary formation, comets, asteroids, the cosmology in general. She's the only girl I know that has read every book in her school library on astronomy. So so that's I think that's a feat in itself. Testament to how interested she is. Her brother even complained that that's all she ever talks about is astronomy and the and the cosmos. But I think that's a great thing to talk about. So, Libby, I'll turn it over to you. Terry, did you want to mention anything about Libby before we get started?
I get that big banner across there.
Yeah, you are muted.
You are muted. Quit talking. Yes, Libby is a member of the Astronomical League. We would love to have her comments on the Observe programs at some point. Look them over sometime. Let us know what you think. And I had asked Libby to talk to us about what got her interested in astronomy to start with. So Libby, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I have a photo slideshow to present. I grabbed some photos from when I was at space museums, and we are presenting. I only pulled up. Oh Lord, just a second. I'm trying to pull this up. So I've always gone to space museums, and I've always been very interested in weather. And here's some of the space museums I've been to. I was at Kennedy Space Center, and I've been to 4 out of 5 of the space centers in America. So I've been to see a lot. I've always been very interested in weather technology. Before I was into space, I was deeply into weather, and I always watched thunderstorms, and I watch Weather Channel and watch them talk about weather stories and a bunch about that, and I was very interested in that. I have some very recent photos, some old photos, and some newer photos. So that was very fun to be able to go to all these space museums. I never thought that I would be interested in space too much. And when I was always like, I'm going to be a storm chaser, and I'm going to have a Jeep, and I'm going to go chase storms and take videos. And that's what I was like, I'm going to do that. Yeah. And I was very surprised because there's a lot more space and science involved in weather than you would think. So I started thinking about space and like the weather on other planets and how that could work together. Last year, I was very lucky to visit Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama. It was very fun. It was an 8-hour road trip down to Huntsville, Alabama, but it was very all worth it. I got to do a bunch of simulators. Here's some photos. There's a big space shuttle in one of the photos at the bottom. That's Pathfinder. Wow. And I thought that was so crazy because it was such a big, it's like a spaceship, and it's like right outside my camp window. So if I looked outside, there's just a spaceship just sitting out there. And so it's very cool to see Pathfinder at Space Camp. And we got to do many simulators. We got to do a lot of simulators. And when I got back home, I was deeply into researching more so I could do more activities with space and thinking about astronomy. And because most of my life I've thought about NASA history from going to museums, because NASA really talks about NASA history and not really about astronomy. So I started researching about astronomy and what I could do. I got this telescope, a 16mm telescope from Meade. It's right behind me. My mom got it for me after I got home from space camp, and I would take it out to the yard and I would take it out to the front yard, and I would look at Saturn's rings, and I would be like, oh my gosh, you could see its rings. And it was so amazing to see Saturn because there's this like rainbow rim around the planet. And it was so amazing to see that. The first time I saw Scott, he was doing it was a lunar outreach, I think. And me and my mom went to it, and I saw the moon, and it was a lunar eclipse, and it was right in the square, and I remember seeing it. And so I went home that night, and I was thinking about the moon and how the sun like hits on the moon and how the eclipse works, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And I think outreach is important because once I got my telescope, I took it out to the yard and I started showing my friends, and I'd be like, that there's the moon, that's it. And my friends didn't get really interested in it, but I was very glad that I was able to inspire them just a little bit. And I think that's why outreach is kind of important, because God inspired me to do astronomy. Once I got my telescope, I started to try and inspire my friends to do astronomy. So I think outreach is very important. So yeah, I made a little slideshow. It's pictures you can look at. This is Space Camp. Very, very cool to look back at the photos because I was in the moment.
It looks like so much fun. It really does.
Yeah, it was like being an actual astronaut. It was so much fun to go, and I got to do a bunch of simulators, and I got to see concepts of astronomy and a bunch of cool things. Simulators over there, that's the one on the bottom left, that's the multi-axis trainer. And I really felt like an astronaut in that one.
Yeah.
And I got to learn about like the center of gravity not making you sick, because your stomach is the center of gravity, so you won't get sick on the ride. And I was kind of, now they were trying to like be like, yeah, you won't throw up on the ride. But I was just like, whoa, that's cool how that's the center of gravity and it's pulling and I'm being spun around crazy. So I think outreach is definitely important for astronomy to inspire more people, inspire a new generation. I stopped sharing.
A question, Libby. They want Christy White wants to know. She said, did they let you look at the telescopes at night?
Actually, they didn't have any telescopes at Space Camp.
Oh.
Most of the stuff at Space Camp was NASA history.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, yes. I wanted to research astronomy, and because I've learned a lot about NASA history too. At Space Camp, they gave us a banana, and all the kids signed their names on it, and we gave it to the grave of the space monkey. I forgot her name. We signed a banana and we put it by her grave. So it's just very fun to go to Space Camp, and it's definitely very fun to inspire people to outreach a lot, because I feel like that is important. I know we talked a lot about outreach last night on the last live stream, and inspiring the new generation. And I take my telescope out to the front yard and I'd be like, okay, that's the moon right there. I'm going to put it in the lens of my telescope and we're going to look at it. And it was always very fun to show my friends and take pictures and send it to my friends and be like, I'm trying to do outreach here. That is the moon. And
Libby, you are a member of the Astronomical League now, and I know that you'll probably get started with some of these observing awards. What do you think you want to try doing first with the Astronomical League?
Well, a couple of nights ago, I read the Messier book I got with my Astronomical League stuff. I didn't get to read it, and so I read it. And there's a challenge in there on the Messier objects. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to accomplish that this year. And when my 10-inch stop sunny, I want to accomplish it.
I think you will. I think you will. That's great.
I think she will too. That's
Yeah.
amazing. We look forward to hearing about your progress.
Terry and Scott, can I interrupt for just 1 second? I want to apologize to Caitlin that I'm going to have to miss her talk, but as Terry and Scott know, I have to introduce a speaker at my club meeting tonight in 15 minutes. So I'm going to need to go, and I apologize for leaving everyone, but thank you.
Chuck,
Thank you, Chuck.
As we always do.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. All right. Well, Libby, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here, and welcome to the Astronomical League. You'll be a great addition to the big family.
Thank you for having me. It's very fun.
Sure, anytime. All right. I am going to move on to John Goss. Now, John is also another past president of the league. He has worn many hats, just like so many others here. So John, and as you heard Carol say, he is heading up the 75th anniversary. So John, I'm going to let you go ahead and take it away.
All right, great. Thanks, Terry. Yeah, I'd like to say a few words, actually a whole bunch of words about the 75th anniversary of the Astronomical League. But first, I'd like to introduce or mention the people who are on the committee with me for putting some of this stuff together. We have a very dynamic member named Peggy Walker. She has, outside of the 75th anniversary, she has taken on this Astronomical League STEM program in Alcon Junior. Alcon Junior is a new thing to be presented at our various Alcons. By the name, you can guess that we're trying to get more young people involved in amateur astronomy through it. She's also been instrumental in putting together our Astronomical League calendar, which is being offered as door prizes tonight. But this is this is the second year for us, so it's still kind of a new thing. And she's done a great job, a lot of work behind this calendar. Also, recently, the details haven't all been released yet, but she has come up with a new award program called the Williamina Fleming Award, Imaging Award, for young amateurs, primarily women, to be introduced into the hobby and be recognized for their efforts. So she has put a lot of work into the 75th anniversary recognition activities. Chuck Allen is also on the committee, and he has compiled an exhaustive amount of detail about League's history, going through old reflectors, talking to old timers in the hobby, trying to figure out what happened when, and he's put together a good history that spotlights important programs, events, and people in the Astronomical League over these past 75 years. Another person is Maynard Pittendray, who is our current executive secretary. Maynard has he likes combing through old reflectors and noting everything he can. So he comes up with a lot of interesting stuff, dates, times, people, for us not to forget and to include in our histories. So I'd like to point out that November 15th, 1946 is the official date that the Astronomical League began, when the last of 10 clubs in the country agreed to become a member of the Amateur Astronomers League. Well, that's not really the Astronomical League quite yet, but it's pretty much the same thing. When I've been doing this, what has struck me is looking at the hobby back then and the hobby today. The people in the hobby back then versus the people in the hobby today. And I ask, well, how have we changed? And I've come to the conclusion that we're all very similar people, those back then as to us today. So let me start with a little philosophical approach on all this about history and the Astronomical League. Who we are and what we are. Consider this. We're a lucky bunch of amateur astronomers. We have easy access to large aperture scopes and can use fantastic imaging equipment, all unheard of when the Astronomical League was in its infancy. Because of this, we surely must be affected differently by our avocation than were the first Astro Leaguers back in 1946. Judging though from articles and notices in the early editions of the Reflector or its precursor, the Bulletin, which we'll talk more about this later, we still have the same fascination and wonder of the sky as amateur astronomers had in the late 1940s and throughout the 50s and 1960s. Deeper appreciation of the avocation, the way it affects us personally, has not changed. Indeed, as the French author and critic Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Carr philosophized in 1849, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I know you've all heard that before. Our equipment has certainly changed, obviously. The darkness of our skies has sadly changed, obviously. And the depth of our understanding of the universe has dramatically changed, obviously. But our interest in the four cornerstones of our avocation's foundation: the science of astronomy, number one; number two, the art of observing; number three, the joy of outreach. We all talk about outreach quite a bit. And number four, the coolness of well-crafted equipment. We have some of the coolest equipment around. Anyway, those really haven't changed. We are still the same astroleaguers at heart as those folks who attended the 1946 and 1947 conventions, when at the beginning, a name was proposed for a new amateur astronomy organization, the Amateur Astronomers League. At the end, and after a name change, the Astronomical League was born with $60-some in its bank account and about 1,600 members spread across 31 societies in the United States. So we definitely have grown. Much of the Astronomical League's business during the first 10 years after its inception was devoted to cementing together the loosely knit national organization. First, a lot of attention was given to organizing and implementing regional meetings and the annual national convention, ALCON. Second, the Bulletin was quickly established to provide needed glue for the young organization, keeping its members informed about local, regional, and national amateur astronomy news. Third, the League officers held many discussions with member societies to discover how the League could better serve amateur astronomy. So once that happened, we had a lot of new benefits rapidly appearing, and I'd like to show you a few of those now. We have the Astronomical League Bulletin. That was long before the Astronomical League Reflector magazine came out. The first one was in, September 1949, about 3 years after the League was established. It was just a 2-page affair, typed. I guess it was mimeographed somehow, since they didn't have copy machines back then, and sent out to members. So you can imagine what came after improvements year after year. The Reflector magazine had a name change from the Bulletin to the Reflector in 1957. And on the right-hand side of the screen, there is a blurb about the winner, the person who submitted the winning name from the Louisville Astronomical Society, which I believe is Chuck Allen's home society right now. Too bad he's left, but he left for his club meeting. But this is what happened in 1957. And then that was a 4-page issue. So we went from 2 pages up to 4. Now today we have the Reflector. The full color glossy magazine looks really good, well done. It is, I have a copy in front of me, it is 32 pages now. And instead of having one person type it out, we have a committee of maybe 6 or 7 people that work on this tirelessly, really, throughout the year. When the issue is done and submitted to the printers, they start on the next issue the following week. Well, maybe 2 weeks later, they get a little break. We're also known, as Chuck was saying, for our observing programs. Well, a big event in our history was the very first award that was given, and it was for the Messier Club, a member of the Amateur Astronomers Association of Pittsburgh. Catherine Delaney won this in January of 1967. So 54 years ago was the very first time this was awarded. And now, instead of just one person, we have several thousand people across the country have earned this since 1967. One thing I found by going back through some old reflectors in 1968 was the first time in the reflector mention was ever given to the serious problem of light pollution. But back then, I guess what they called it back then was dark pollution. And that kind of makes more sense to me because it's the dark that's being polluted and not the light. But that was taken back in 1968. You can imagine that is now a big deal and it's on everyone's mind. As we grew, we introduced new programs. Now, Chuck Allen, again, who has just left, was instrumental behind establishing our very first award program for young people, the National Outstanding Young Astronomers Award. So that was in 1993. Quick, how many years ago was that? 29. Okay, that was some time ago. And we've been awarding these things ever since. We picked up sponsors, and we're grateful to have Scott Roberts and Explorer Scientific sponsor this. And I'm sure Scott can talk about this a lot too, because we have awarded this award to a number of exceptional students. Yes. You know, we talk about these awards and young people getting this stuff. Well, the idea really isn't to try to get them to become professional astronomers. I think more the idea is to encourage young people to look at what they can do, to develop their interest in what could be a lifelong avocation, to open their minds to where their lives may lead, to open their hearts for a love of the night sky. And all these people, it will have that happen to them. They may not all become professional astronomers, but that's a pretty good award. And you know, thank you, Scott, for sponsoring this. We have other awards for young people. The Horchata Award, and that was back in I should know this off the top of my head, 1998. And it started out with Jack Horkheimer, the renowned promoter of amateur astronomy. He wanted to recognize young people who make a special effort to bring astronomy to their community, to their club, and so on. So it's for a service award for a young astronomer. That was one award back then, but that program has expanded. So we have we have 4 different awards today, and for most of those, there's a first, second, and third place. So we really want to recognize the young people who make an effort in astronomy through this award and through the National Young Astronomer Award. More things have come up since 1946. I mentioned the Reflector Magazine observing programs. We now also have access to affordable club liability insurance. We have something called Astronotes and outreach downloads for people to look at and learn something new about the night sky and help them observe. Of course, we have ALCON, our national convention every year, Library Telescope Awards program. That's a great program in which clubs, if they're lucky enough to win a drawing, they'll get a telescope to present to their local library so patrons can check them out as they do books. We have many recognition awards. I only talked about the youth ones here, but we have the Leslie C. Peltier Award, which again, I want to thank Scott Roberts for helping support that for us. We have Webmaster Award. We have the Newsletter Award, Newsletter Editor Award. We have Sketch Awards. Of course, now we have Imaging Awards. So you get the idea. So we have quite a few things in the Astronomical League these days that we're proud to share with people. I'd like to conclude by reading something off to you. What will the Astronomical League be? The Astronomical League may have a national reach, but it is still a small nonprofit organization. Its strength and successes are directly tied to the efforts of its over 100 volunteers. Members who actively participate in the League have a great opportunity to influence the direction of how this nationally respected organization will engage amateur astronomy. As you learn about astronomy, share the sky with others, gaze upon an intriguing celestial object, or carefully inspect a new scope, please know that the Astronomical League is here for you, the Astro Leaguer, just as it was in 1946. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, John.
I was on mute.
If you don't want to join the Astronomical League now, I don't know what it would take.
Well, thank you, John. That's a lot of good information there. We've had a lot of history. We've learned really a lot about the League in the last few months because of all the work that has been done for our 75th anniversary. And I'm looking forward to hearing even more about our past because it's made us what we are today. So, Scott, how about taking a 10-minute break before we bring Caitlin on?
All right, that sounds fine. Okay, so
Okay.
we'll do that.
Well, thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. Here we go. Well, we are back. And I'm going to turn this over to Terry Mann to introduce our keynote speaker, Caitlin Ahrens. And Terry, you've got the stage.
Thank you very much, Scott.
You've got the stage.
There we go. I have known Caitlin. Oh, we talked about this last night for quite a while, or a couple of days ago. My days are blurred. I've been here a while. She has been one of those people that probably many of you have looked at a younger person at some point and said, wow, I can't wait to see what she becomes. I mean, you could just tell her focus was just amazing. And yet she still remained normal and, like a normal kid would be, but she was amazing. I mean, it was just something that you knew. And she's always been a real treat to know. She's always been full of energy, so many ideas, so interesting to talk to. And as we heard earlier, she was one of the 2010 Astronomical League Horkheimer Dioria Youth Winner Award, won one of the awards for the Horkheimer Dioria, which Tippy Dioria was an amazing person. Quite a few of us knew him, and he has passed away, but he was probably he was all about astronomy. I really learned a lot from him. So to have Caitlin win an award after him too is really cool. So let me tell you a little bit about Caitlin. Caitlin is a graduate of West Virginia University with Bachelor of Science degrees in Geology and Physics, Astrophysics. Her background includes theoretical seismology, mineral analysis on the Martian surface, and radio astronomy. In spring of 2020, she received her PhD in Space and Planetary Sciences at the University of Arkansas on her research simulating Pluto conditions in her lab to create various light ice phases and researching Plutonian glaciers. Currently, Caitlin is a NASA postdoctorate program fellow at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center, working on lunar ice and impact craters. Caitlin's also produced a radio show called Scratching the Surface, and it will soon be a podcast, and is a solar system ambassador with for NASA. She does many forms of astronomical outreach across the nation. I can vouch for that. This girl knows what she's doing. She also earned in 2018, she was named one of the 10 outstanding young Americans. So Caitlin, thank you for being here. I really appreciate this. I'm sure you're going to wow us all. So you have the stage.
Thank you, Terry, so much for that amazing introduction. Thank you so much. And thank you, Astronomical League, for having me here tonight. So a little anecdote, when Terry first emailed me about this event, I was going to attend anyways because I've been a part of Astronomical League through my own astronomy club back in West Virginia, the Central Appalachian Astronomy Club. And I would not miss an anniversary celebration. And then when she emailed me, hey, would you want to give a talk and whatnot, I was like, oh, yes. So we started plotting what possible topic to entertain all you fine folks out there tonight. So we settled on planetary seismology. So hopefully you will enjoy that. I'm going to figure out how to share my screen. Gotta love technology. All right. Fantastic. All right. So welcome to Shake, Rattle, and Roll Seismology of the Solar System. So let's get started with a little bit of basics going on here. So planetary seismology, I do want to put in the context here that this is not necessarily astroseismology. Astroseismology is actually its very own branch. Believe it or not, our own sun and stars out in our beautiful galaxy and beyond actually produce their own waves internally, and that's still to be a mystery. That's still to be researched over and over again by far. And so that in itself is astroseismology, is the seismic interactions within star systems and even our own sun with heliophysics. So specifically tonight, I'm going to talk about planetary seismology. So planetary seismology is very, very interdisciplinary. So you can have certain seismologists that study planets. You can have certain planetary scientists study seismology. And it has to be a huge interdisciplinary process, though. So you can have people specifically looking at the mineralogy. You need to know what kind of rocks and minerals are on these surfaces of planets and moons and even asteroids to be able to figure out the geophysics. And then the geophysics can then stem outward to the thermodynamics and the rheology. What makes the faults? What makes it shake in the interior? Then you really need to stem that from the chemistry, which also ties back to the mineralogy. What are you dealing with? Rock? Are you dealing with salt? Are you dealing with different kinds of ice? There's plenty of different kinds of ice in the outer solar system, and I'll get to that here in a bit. And then it all comes down to, if we were to explore these wonderful planets and asteroids and moons, it all comes down to the engineering. How can we engineer instruments to better study the interior of these planets and moons and asteroids? So quick basic definitions. We're going to start with the Earth. We base a lot of our understanding of the planets and moons and asteroids based on the Earth, but rather not all comparisons are what they seem. So, but you'll find that out by the end of this talk, how actually difficult it is to compare everything else to the Earth. So basics of earthquakes. We found out actually not too long ago that we have an inner core and outer core, a mantle and a crust. So our crust is variable thickness. It depends upon where you are around the Earth. So, but it's essentially the very thin outer rocky shell. And then you have the mantle just below that. It's a flow. It's a very slow flow solid interior. And then you have outer core, which is a liquid iron, and then an inner core that is solid iron. So the thing how we knew about these layers essentially is that you have an earthquake happen, and the sheer seismic energy that comes out of that earthquake rips essentially through the mantle and the cores of the Earth. But it does some really weird stuff. Notice with this diagram that the seismic waves do not just go cleanly through the Earth. They actually bounce around. They bounce off of that inner and outer core. And because of that, we've learned much earlier on those kinds of bounces. And then with earthquake science, we have the 3 F's. We have the friction, the forces, and the faults. So first off, we have friction, where you have some sort of fault dynamic going on. You want to have essentially some sort of elastic rebound, some sort of high friction fault, but then there's different kinds of faults that I'll get here in a bit. There's forces, pretty much how would that propagation of energy go? How would it flow? Again, it goes back into the rheology, the type of rock, the type of mineralogy that we're dealing with here. If we were just dealing with pure solid rock, is it hard enough rock that is just going to break and snap and be brittle, or is it going to be soft and squishy and porous, and then the energy is going to barely filter through? It's going to be practically muted. So forces are very important. And then certainly faults, if there are any to be seen. That becomes an interesting question on certain moons and planetary systems that I'll talk about later. But we have some very beautiful faults all over the Earth. Certainly the San Andreas fault is the most notable. That is called a transform fault, where you essentially have what's called strike slip, and you have two blocks just rub against each other like so. And it can create some pretty decently sized magnitude earthquakes from there. Then you have divergent, and you can have different kinds of divergent as well as subcategories of divergent, where you have the two blocks of crust going away from each other. And then you can have this kind of convergent with subduction zones. So you can have three different types. There's ocean-ocean, ocean-continent, and then continent-continent. And again, this still boils down to what kind of crust we're dealing with. If it's a very dense, squishy crust, or can it be a dense, porous crust? Is it brittle? And so on. So thermodynamics and the mineralogy and chemistry really come to play with a lot of these fault systems here. And then back to the engineering. How do we actually detect earthquakes? So the whole method of detecting earthquakes, and certainly the use of seismograms and whatnot, has really improved through the years. So this diagram, certainly not to scale by any means, but you have an earthquake happen, and essentially you have a piece of seismic equipment that is somewhat buried down a couple meters into the surface, and it's supposed to feel that vibration. It's supposed to catch and signal back to an array of computers and go like, hey, we detected this amount of energy from this location. It's an earthquake. And I want to share a little bit about the evolution of our Earth knowledge. So like I said, this, in the grand scheme of things, it really hasn't been that long ago. So back in 1900, Richard Oldham observed the PS and surface waves on a seismogram. So all those cute little squiggles that you see on a piece of paper that seismologists love to sift through, then that's where it all started, is 1900s though. But same one, 1906, realized that the primary and secondary wave arrivals, there was some discrepancies. They realized that, okay, these waves should not be going straight through the Earth. What in the world is going on? And therefore it confirmed the Earth's core. But in that case, it wasn't just a single core. Now you're having to deal with how long it takes for the energy waves to go through. So that was in 1907. Then you have the theory of plate tectonics by Wagner in 1912, but that wasn't accepted until the 1950s in the geologic community. So that was a huge debate that went on for quite some time. Back to travel times. So how the travel times of the primary and secondary waves rip through the interior of the Earth led into like, oh, well, okay, depends upon where you are on the Earth, then, how do these times correlate with each other? Finally, Richter in only 1935 developed the Richter scale that we now have our wonderful scale of magnitudes of earthquakes. And then finally, Lemon in 1936 showed that it's not just a single core, there is a solid inner core that's been making all these beautiful primary waves just bounce off like crazy. So the Richter scale we actually use somewhat in the planetary sciences though, but now we're starting to realize that the Richter scale should probably stay on Earth. And can we come up with almost like our own scaling system for like the Moon and Mars? It'll pretty much be somewhat the same, but Richter scales, you have like 5 magnitude and 7 magnitude and goodness gracious 9 magnitude kind of deal, where the most you're going to get on most planets and asteroids and moons are going to be maybe 4, 5 if you're really lucky. So the scaling could get a little interesting though. But it's essentially a scale of how much energy is being released from that event. So having some sort of magnitude scale would be incredibly important for the planetary sciences. So now we're going to jump right into planetary seismology. I'm going to take you on a lovely tour of bits and pieces of the solar system, at least, and in its regards to seismology. So again, keeping in mind that all these interdisciplinary topics must be applied as we're exploring here. So keep those in mind. So first up is the lovely Mercury. So with Mercury, though, we never had a lander. We never really had exactly a seismometer on the surface of Mercury. That would be amazing if we did it. It's way into the future at some point. But the thing about Mercury is that it still has some really beautiful geology. And one of the really interesting geologic features of Mercury is certain wrinkle ridges. So these wrinkle ridges and certain faults are in certain orientations around the planet, to the point where scientists are now realizing, oh my goodness, Mercury is actually shrinking. Now, the actual shrinking, I don't mean something out of like a Buck Rogers serial going on where someone shrinks down to the size of an ant or something like that. But as funny as that would be, but no, Mercury is actually just slowly shrinking because the mantle system within Mercury is actually slowly cooling, and because it's cooling and heating and cooling and heating so slowly, the crust is also kind of undulating in itself as well. But since the crust is so brittle in that regard, it's not going to squish like usual. It's going to break. It's very brittle. So because of that tension, it's going to create these wrinkles. And here's another beautiful example of a wrinkle here. Let's see if my cursor can maybe show up here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so beautiful wrinkle ridge there. All right, so onward to Venus. This is an elevation map of Venus. So by all means, if I were to show you a real picture of Venus, it would just be clouds. So we had to have a lot of like radiometer, radar systems going around Venus to give us this beautiful elevation map of Venus here. So what you see here is that the white and red areas of Venus, especially around the equatorial region here, are the very, very, very high parts. High elevations of Venus, and then the darker blue and purple black areas here are the lowest elevations. But what's cool here is that elevations are great, but what's interesting is that there are over 400 volcanoes on Venus. So you would think, okay, that many volcanoes, whether they're active or inactive is still under debate, still gives rise as to like, okay, there's got to be some sort of tectonic activity without necessarily having plates either. So this is another beautiful example of some of the volcanic plains going on Venus. So a lot of this, what looks like white scratch marks, I promise you that is not your screen getting all scratched up here. What all these are is just little itty bitty faults just crisscrossing each other like clusters. And they can go on for kilometers and kilometers and kilometers across the surface, and they can change directions. Some areas of Venus have more of these clusters more than others. So this is still very much under a lot of research studies right now as to, is there rhyme and reason to a lot of these orientations and clusters of faults. And then also there's a particular question here. Could Venus have subduction zones even without having active tectonic plate systems? So there, the Aleutian Trench on Earth, which is, this is around Alaska here on Earth. So this trench matches pretty much the curvature and elevation of Artemis Corona on Venus. So now the next step that we're hoping to do on Venus in this regard is just more of the elevation, and is there any volcanic systems around this corona? So that is still being worked on. All right, onward to the moon. So everybody loves the moon. We've done a lot of studies with the moon, and we are still continuing to do so. We hope to do at least more geophysical research with the moon. A mission that we hope to deal with at some point is something called the Lunar Geophysical Network, which you would have an array of essentially seismograms and different kinds of like miniature seismic instruments scattered across bits and pieces of the moon, and then try to give us a better idea of what exactly is going on with the moon. Because the thing about the moon is that we're aware of the theory that a Mars-like sized object would have hit the Earth sometime in Earth's early geologic history, and all that baby Earth crust essentially accreted outward and then gravitationally pulled into the ball that we now know is the moon. And because of that, though, because of that accretion, we still do not have a 100% clear idea as to what in the world does this interior look like. We do realize that it is a baby Earth crust because of the minerals involved all across the moon. But what about the interior? That is still to be determined, though. But the moon's surface certainly gives us a lot of geologic clues as to what is currently going on as far as the interior versus the exterior of the surface goes. So you can have a lot of disjointed faults going on here. So what I mean by disjointed is that you would have a crack going on, and then it would almost look like it's shifted, it's broken apart. It's not exactly a straight line. Some of them can be very curly. You can have what's called grobens, where grobens are just very fairly shallow, but they're wide, very, very wide. It almost looks like a worm going across the lunar surface here. But there are plenty of them that go across the moon, though. We're hoping to have a better map of a lot of these groben systems hopefully soon, but mapping does take a while. But we have had seismic experiments on the moon, all started with the Apollo 11 passive seismic experiment. So this essentially did detect lunar moonquakes. This whole objective was to study the propagation of seismic waves through the moon, and whether this means is something going on the interior of the moon. Can the moon essentially create its own moonquakes, or is it essentially through meteorites hitting the surface? And so far we have recorded about 100 to 200 hits of meteorites during the lifetime of this experiment. We have had return data for just 3 weeks, but from that passive seismic experiment, we've improved the instrumentation, and much more advanced seismometers were deployed with Apollo 12, 14, 15, and 16 at those landing sites. So we still definitely have all that data archived as well. So a little bit about the configuration of this wonderful instrument, though. So it's actually quite a simple setup, though. It's you have the antenna for communications to send back the seismic readings. You want to make sure that your whole setup is very much laying down onto the ground and pressed as much as possible. And you have your solar panels going on as well. Make sure it's all powered on. And from that, we were able to figure out, okay, what's considered noise and background oscillations of just the moon itself versus actual meteorites striking the surface, and what in the world is going on. So on the left here, you have normal. So this is just the normal noise, the normal shaking going on. So that's considered background. Shallow impacts. So you could either have just a very distant impact really not that large of a meteorite that could hit. So just a very shallow one, but hey, it gave us a signal and then certainly a major impact. So luckily those don't happen all too often, or at least as far as the recording goes, but that's for the purpose of presentations, this is the best diagrams that they can give us to show. Otherwise, the data is actually quite noisy. Mars has given us a lot to think about with planetary seismology, especially in the past 2 years. And I'll talk about the Mars InSight lander here in a bit, though. But beautiful, beautiful Mars. You have some of the largest volcanoes in the entire solar system on this planet. You have the magnificent Valles Marineris ripping across the surface here of Mars as well. So you know that there's just so much dynamic going on Mars, whether it was from its geologic past and certainly in its present. So by all means, I could probably spend a whole hour just showing you images of Mars and certainly the geology of Mars and the tectonics of Mars and so on and so forth, though. So trust me, I'm limiting to at least some of the images that I find very, very interesting as far as seismology goes. So here's just a bunch of crisscross grobens and fault systems going on here. The width of this particular image is about 3 kilometers, so very up close and personal on the surface of Mars. These images were taken by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter HiRISE camera. So thank you, HiRISE. Here you have a bunch of smaller faults. Essentially, the surface here is cracking under some sort of pressure and stress going on here. Most of the stress that happens on Mars can be a whole slew of different ideas. So whether it's volcanism, here in particular, it's volcanism with certain lava flows cracking the system, or cracking the surface rather. And sometimes it could be landslides, it can be seasonal cracking. It's all over the place. Mars is very interesting. Here, though, you also have just a bunch of much smaller faults coming out of some smaller crater systems here. You have some mineral deposits that may be influencing the direction of some of these faults going on here, though. So mineralogy does take into effect, especially on Mars. Oops, oh, no, okay. I thought my screen froze there for a minute. So let me talk about InSight, though. So InSight is a beautiful mission. And as with NASA, we love our acronyms. So get ready for a very long acronym of InSight. So InSight stands for Interior Exploration Using Seismic Investigations, Geodesy, and Heat Transport. So it landed on Mars in the Elysium region in November 2018. It was designed to be a lander, so did not orbit the planet. It's not roving around or anything. It's simply just to stay put and nose drop. So we did design it similar to the Phoenix lander, except the Phoenix lander did more climate. InSight is supposed to do more seismology, thermodynamics, and rheology. So a good portion of those interdisciplinary topics I talked about earlier. It does have a camera. It has a heat probe called a mole and certainly a seismometer. So here's the actual schematic of the entire mission, and it does seem a bit daunting at first, though, but it does come in different parts, and each section of this lander has its own team. So at the bottom left here, you have the size. This is the seismometer experiment. Go figure, though. Off to the right here, you have the HP cubed, which is the heat probe. It stands for Heat and Physical Properties Package. That's why it's called HP cubed. But from now on, I'm just going to call it the heat probe or the mole. This is essentially the mole attached to it, though. And then you have twins, which is the temperature and wind. We want to make sure that the winds aren't affecting the seismometer in any way. And also, we really need to know better about the wind and climate in that particular part of Mars as well. Now, I'll talk about twins here in a bit, though. And then you have RISE. Oh, yep, there's RISE. So RISE is their radio and communications. And what's cool about RISE is that it's also not only supposed to do communications back to certain Mars orbiters and certainly back to Earth, but it's also supposed to give communication time delays as well. This is actually really cool and important because the time delays could also give us a lot about the planetary rotation and if Mars actually wobbles any. And it does. Not a lot of results have been released yet, though, but it is really quite cool. So this is some of its sensor pads hitting the surface, though, trying to get all ready. You can already tell it's getting a little dusty in this particular picture. This is part of its camera system, so it would take pictures of sunrise and sunsets to get a better idea of just, why not? It's pretty pictures on Mars either way. Right. But it does give us an idea of some of the climate going on here. Certainly the haze. You'd hardly be able to see a beautiful starry night on Mars for sure. It's always dusty. There's dust and sand everywhere. So here's a video of some of the clouds. This was actually interesting. This is the seismometer. But while the camera system was going, there was some beautiful cloud systems going by, and there was part of the InSight team actually wrote a paper just on the cloud system that they took on the video from this, because again, cloud systems on a completely different planet. It's like, oh goodness, like what does that mean for like the climate? How would the clouds would have originated? And planetary weather systems is a completely different branch of planetary science, though, and it's very, very fascinating. So I just really wanted to show you this video. But this is when InSight pretty much first landed. So it's beautiful, it's clean, there's the beautiful solar panels, and now it's all dusty. So it's it's still doing its job, but it got its work out within just the first month. It got a nice dust bath, if anything else. Now the thing about it getting dusty and everything, though, 2 months in, I do want to talk about the mole. So the reason for the mole is going back to that rheology and thermodynamics aspects of planetary seismology. Yes, the seismometer is doing its job. It's telling us about the interior. But again, we need to understand the materials at work here. What is the material science behind Mars? So the thing about the mole is that it got stuck. Within the first 2 months, its objective was to reach about 16 feet into the ground. That was its purpose. And we ran a lot of laboratory work that you see pictured here. A lot of this was done at Jet Propulsion Laboratory, but we also have laboratories basically all over the nation solving this problem of, okay, how would the mole drill itself down? How would we have the sensors going on and so on and so forth? The problem, though, is that we can only go so far as to guessing what the material of Mars is. We've had numerous rovers and landers on Mars, but it can only give us so much data to go off of. So again, the objective of the mole was supposed to go down 16 feet within the first 2 months. And unfortunately, that entire time, it only went 14 inches.
Oh.
So not 16 feet by far. So what you also see here, though, is, back to the lab. They replicated the mole, they replicated at least half of the rover in its entirety to figure out, like, okay, so how do we unstuck the mole, and then how do we reapply the mole back into the surface? And they had a solution at one point back in mid 2019. There's a scoop handle that's attached to the lander as well. Now, the scoop was supposed to essentially help start the hole for the mole. And now they're wondering, oh, could the scoop essentially help push the mole into the ground a little bit further, though? So I'll get back to the fate of the mole here pretty soon. But April 2019, we got our very first Mars quake. So we got Mars wind to make sure that we're not hearing noise. It just gets rid of all the background and everything, though. And then finally, we got our likely Mars quake. And since that time, since April 2019, we have at least over 50, if not over 70 Mars quakes by now. I'm pretty sure we've actually reached over the hundreds. I may have put it in my PowerPoint. Yep. Okay. 480. I just looked up this number yesterday. But now going into the hundreds region of Mars quakes, the official analysis and results aren't going to be released until like March, later in March, I think. So I'm really excited to hear about the results of that. So we're living in interesting times for sure. But since then, now we're realizing, oh, okay, so if this is what a Mars quake looks like, since then, Mars Insight has also realized what dust devil signatures look like. If a dust devil were to be nearby, what kind of vibrations could the seismometer pick up as well? Unfortunately, just yesterday, NASA has made its decision to completely just get rid of the mole. So unfortunately, the mole has ended its wonderful 14-inch journey into Mars. And unfortunately, the heat probe was just not able to gain the friction it needed to dig. So that happened just yesterday. So rest in peace, mole. Now, here's the thing, though. Yes, we're sad and disheartened by this, but because of only going down 14 inches and whatnot, just because it didn't quite do its main objective, we still learned a lot about this. And it goes back to the beautiful buzzwords I've been saying this whole time here is the mineralogy, the thermodynamics, and the rheology of the surface of Mars, that we do not have a 100% clarity of what the surface of Mars is actually up to. Yeah, we get Mars quakes. Now we're having a better understanding of the interior. But now we're realizing, oh, the surface of Mars, the actual material science of Mars can be a little bit more compact than what our poor mole couldn't handle. So rest in peace, mole. All right, so onward to Ceres. So Ceres, beautiful asteroid, some beautiful geology all over the place. The Dawn mission got at Ceres. It gave us some beautiful low orbit images, and to our wonderful surprise, some beautiful images of some very interesting crater systems and also some fault systems as well. So especially around the Juling crater. So Juling and Capallo are very young craters. We could tell that they're young by how sharp their rims are, and also some bright deposits on the walls of these craters as well. Typically means that it's at least freshly excavated material. And from that, we see what appears to be an interesting fault that has been disrupted, if not going through some of these craters. And also some beautiful 3D images have recently come out of Ceres as well. So you have some interesting fault streaks and fault wrinkle ridges, very similar to Mercury, but may not necessarily be the same process as Mercury. So we don't for sure know, is Ceres shrinking? We don't know. We hope not. That would be weird. And then onward to Europa. Now, at Jupiter and beyond, now we're dealing with no longer rock. Now we're dealing with ice. And ice is a completely different, certainly a different chemical by all means, but a completely different mechanical system, if anything. So you have even different types of water ice. Fun fact, there's actually 7 different types of water ice in the outer solar system. And you thought water ice was boring in your freezer. Well, not anymore. Outer solar system got you covered. And to our happy surprise, it's not just water ice in the outer solar system. You're also dealing with frozen carbon dioxide, frozen carbon monoxide, nitrogen, methane, ammonia. It could also play some interesting parts in this as well. So we're going to hippity hop over to Europa here. So Europa has been imaged quite a few times. We're supposed to get some interesting images of Europa from the Juno extended mission, so that'll be pretty exciting. But through the Hubble Space Telescope, we actually have at least very pixelated water signatures coming out of the south pole or region, southern hemisphere of Europa. So that has at least confirmed, okay, there's plume action going on. Well, if there's plumes going on, that means something is going on in the interior. So what in the world could the interior of Europa look like? Well, we still don't know. But the surface can certainly tell us a lot of what in the world is going on. So you have all these complete chaotic terrains going on. And interestingly enough, geologists have tried to label everything and anything under the sun. But you get a geologist to look at this and you're like, yep, that's chaos. And that's exactly what we call this type of terrain, is chaos terrain. We don't know how better else to describe it. It's just pure chaos. So you have these all these ridges, all these faults crisscrossing all over the place. It would take forever to map all these bumpy knobs. The knobby terrain that we like to call them here is still being researched right now as to, is it something being deposited on top, or is it coming from the interior and it's bubbling? Essentially, it's kind of oozing up onto the surface. And again, what in the world is going on in the interior to make stuff ooze and crack at the same time in practically the same areas? Onward to Io. Io is also supposed to get some beautiful images from the Juno extended mission as well. And Io has been a very entertaining moon, to say the least. It's been imaged anything from the Galileo mission all the way to the New Horizons mission when it flew by Jupiter, turned on its cameras and looked at Io and kept seeing plumes all over the place. So there is constant volcanism going on and beautiful plumes going on Io. What we think may be all the time, but it's still a hit and miss if you point the camera at the right angle and the right time. But as far as volcanism on Io goes, we still need to figure out what in the world is going on. How is ice and sulfur being mixed together to create these very squishy looking volcanoes all over Io, and yet still crack the surface and have all these interesting lava flows and caldera pits, and like the one on the right here, the image to the right here, though, that clear cracking fracture across one of those volcanic structures, though. It's, how can you be squishy and brittle at the same time? So Io is definitely a thermodynamicist's dream and nightmare. And then onward to Titan, which is Saturn's largest moon. It is quite an interesting moon, to say the least. The unfortunate part about Titan, though, is that similar to Venus, it has a very thick atmosphere. So getting any kind of images, in this case, we had to resort to a lot of infrared and different kinds of wavelength imagery to even just barely peer through the clouds, very thick hazes of Titan though. But all this dark region you see here is a mixture of different kinds of lakes. You have dunes. It's a beautiful moon, but we just do not have enough images to really figure out what is going on. Now, an interesting geologic feature on Titan is what's called labyrinths. So labyrinths are very, very strange. So imagine, if you will, close your eyes, if you will, if you want to imagine this. And if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you'll appreciate this though. But imagine a great ice wall towering above you, and it's just a maze that stretches for miles and miles and miles. And for all you know, there may not be a solution to get a way out, to say the least. But that's essentially what labyrinths are, just these giant ice wall, ice mazes that are just scattered across the surface of Titan. And in that regard, how would those have formed? And we're thinking maybe tectonically, but then how can you have those kind of features without having plates? Could there be some really weird fault systems going on Titan to make it maze-like that? Could something be coming up from the interior of Titan and cracking the surface in such a maze-like way? So it's such a mystery. Ariel, poor Ariel is a very neglected moon, unfortunately, of Uranus, though. But Ariel is such a beautiful moon, full of faults, and certainly some of the most beautiful faults, in my opinion. Very much in my opinion. A lot of people can argue with me on that. But just all of the how thick a lot of these faults are for such a tiny moon, how most of the faults are actually what looks to be more toward the bottom part of this moon though. But unfortunately with Ariel and most of the moons of Uranus and Neptune, we only got barely half of the surfaces imaged of these moons from the Voyager missions and have never been imaged since. So this is as much as we can go on, unfortunately, but some beautiful faults going on there as well. You also have Miranda. Miranda is what we lovingly nicknamed the Frankenstein Moon. This poor moon, goodness gracious, it looks like someone had a paper doll, cut her up, and tried to poorly paste back together. I mean, just poor Miranda, it looks like had an interesting geologic history, battle scars galore. And so all this, and you may think, oh, that's got to be a bug in the image. That's got to be my screen is weird or anything. Nope. What you're seeing is correct. It is very angular, almost looks smooth going on here though. And how that came to be is still, again, still a mystery. But we call these coronae or chevrons, depends upon who you talk to though. But certainly some weird interior and exterior processes going on there. And then onward to Pluto. So Pluto, New Horizons got to Pluto in the summer of 2015 and gave us at least a good portion of Pluto's surface to be imaged. And thankfully we got, in my opinion, the prettier side of Pluto though. So just looking at this image though, the first thing that you probably come to mind, besides the giant smooth hole off to the right here though, is that how many beautiful different colors there are. And that's the interesting weird part about Pluto, is that every different color you see here is a different type of ice, essentially. So welcome back the chemistry, the rheology, the thermodynamics, combine it all, and certainly with the geologic and mineralogy aspects of it too. Now we're realizing, okay, if you're dealing with different types of ice, they're all going to have different types of chemistry. They're all going to have different types of rheology. They're all going to break differently. They're all going to squish differently. They're all going to heat differently. So having different kinds of faults all over Pluto has certainly been a bit of a research project of mine as well. So this is near the northern hemisphere of Pluto. So what you see here is some decently sized, almost looks like branching out. You start with the one larger branch of a fault, and then it branches out to much smaller squiggly faults there. But then the farther south you go, the more intense a lot of this cracking goes, though. So you have this huge, beautiful cluster going on here. So this is part of the Virgil Fosse complex here. And then again, extending from Virgil Fosse, you also have Hermod, which extends quite extensively, going from south to north here. And then you have a cluster of faults all the way down in the southern hemisphere here. So this long, skinny one here that has a red interior because of all this gunk. It's called Tholins, by the way. It's called Cacnu. And then I want to share real quick about Charon, though. So Charon is the largest moon of Pluto. And you can see here, we almost call this the jawbreaker moon, teasingly, because the northern part of Charon and then the southern part of Charon look completely different moons. You have more degraded, almost crunchy looking exterior on the northern part, and then a more smoother, slightly, definitely cratered area though, but definitely smoother southern hemisphere there. But definitely the more noticeable feature, besides the the red bald spot that it has on top there, named Mordor, by the way, for all you Lord of the Rings fans right there. It has a giant canyon in the middle of it, and so this particular canyon has actually just had a paper published not too long ago that has some interesting hypotheses as to how this canyon may have formed. And what may be going on is the interior of Charon would have had to essentially almost float the blocks of material up, and then almost like an island, just kind of extend them outward. So we have some interesting research in the works. So by all means, there are a ton of mysteries, and I've certainly named off probably a million mysteries and many more questions for us planetary scientists to still research, though. But we have the Europa Clipper, which is still in what we call storyboard mode. So we're still trying to figure out, we have a better idea of what instruments we want to have on Europa Clipper, but would any of them help with a lot of the seismology and a lot of the interior that could be going on? We're hoping so. We're hoping to have at least some sort of thermal imaging going on, and maybe and hopefully a magnetometer. Magnetometers can actually really help with the interiors as far as cores go, and how fluid and fluctuating the interior can actually be, which would be nice. And then certainly we have the Dragonfly. So Dragonfly is a much anticipated mission out of many NASA centers, but specifically Goddard Space Flight Center. I'm very interested in the DragMet, which is the Dragonfly Geophysics and Meteorology instrument. So this will be built similarly to InSight, but the thing about Dragonfly is that it is not necessarily a lander, but rather a rotorcraft lander. So it'll land onto the surface, do its thing. It'll take a very quick little seismometer reading. It'll hopefully it'll have like a little scoop where it'll actually eat. It'll have like a little stomach compartment. It'll eat bits and pieces of the Titan surface. It'll have lasers, hopefully, inside of its stomach to analyze the rheological and mineralogical properties of the surface of Titan, spit it back up, and have like little propeller copter drone like copter wings going on, and just kind of hop around the surface and just keep doing that over and over again. So it's a very interesting, certainly an engineer's dream and nightmare as well, I'm sure. I do not envy the engineers whatsoever, but good luck to the engineering team for making this happen. It'll be certainly a mission and one for the books. But I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody may have about planetary seismology and certainly the interiors of planets that we may or may not really have a full understanding of. But thank you so much to the Astronomical League for having me here tonight.
Wow.
Oh, thank you, Caitlin. My gosh. You know, it's amazing to me to listen to that information that you gave, and then to actually be able to look at images so clear. You put both those together, your information and the images. That was amazing. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Oh, my gosh. Are there any questions yet, Scott?
Martin Eastburn asked early on into Caitlin's presentation, what kind of heat and chem mix from minerals? So she was talking about, I guess, the mineralogy. Okay, I have a tough time saying it. He says he was a minor in geology 50 years ago, so he's just kind of curious about that. Can you speak to that, Caitlin?
Sure. Should I stop sharing my screen? No.
Up to you.
Well, we'll see, because my computer has temporarily stopped figuring stuff out. Here we go. Okay, hello. I'm back now. Yes, so that's the interesting part. So Mars is probably our best, a little bit of the moon too, though, but Mars, certainly we have a much better idea as far as the chemistry and mineralogy of a completely different world. And the mineralogy and chemistry is quite different than on Earth. Within the past 10 years, we've actually found 3 completely new minerals that have never been found on Earth. We have no idea how to even elaborate them, but we found them on Mars. We found them through Martian meteorites. And so having that completely be mind-boggling that there are minerals out there that we're like, oh, great. Okay, we have no idea what kind of chemistry we're dealing with, though. But mineralogy and chemistry certainly need to be combined interdisciplinary here, because if you have small grains versus coarse grains, larger grains of minerals, that can affect how the faults are formed, how the energy of those Mars quakes would have propagated. Then you can have, there's actually different kinds of heat pockets on Mars as well, which is a completely different headache all in itself. You have different heat pockets around the volcanic areas of Mars. So Mars quakes around volcanic areas versus ancient river deltas can have completely different mineralogy. There's different iron content. Iron can certainly be very dense. But like dried river deltas, the one that the Perseverance rover is going to, Jezero Crater, definitely a beautiful delta system there. A lot of clay, so it's going to be much more squishy, much more soft minerals going on there instead of not a lot of iron, or we don't really expect a lot of iron content there. So may not be as brittle either. We don't know yet. Hopefully Perseverance can help us answer a lot of questions there.
A couple other comments here. Book Davies says, I'd like to see a Zubrin crater or something on Mars. He rates something like that, in my honest opinion. Martin Eastburn comments, he says, we have an expert that puts up arrays of satellites that could wind down to the surface in a net to be the resource to measure from. I'm sure he's alluding to Elon Musk and the Starlink satellites and putting up arrays of satellites. Let's see. A joke you can use in the future: if I crack under pressure, is it my fault? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, and people were asking questions about the mole. Of course, I remember reading about it today as well.
Oh, poor mole. Poor mole. That
Poor
just
mole.
happened
We think
yesterday
it hit a rock.
too.
We think it hit a rock. You know, and
Yeah,
you're in
just
Arkansas. I mean, how far would you go before you hit limestone? I mean, it wouldn't be very far.
West Virginia is the same thing.
Yeah.
How far can you hit before you hit coal? Well,
Yeah.
not far.
Not far. That's right. Uh, and Martin comments again. He says in the 90s he met a NASA scientist flying cross country. Since I worked for a massive oil service company, I was in high tech at that time. I mentioned his problem on drilling in planets. He mentioned his problem in drilling on planets. So
Yeah, drilling is certainly a different debate, not necessarily in the ways of like fracking. We're not going to hit oil by any means, any extent to the imagination on planets and asteroids here, but asteroid mining is still a possibility. But now the problem is because of the mole problem now, do we have a clear understanding of how to build these drills? Maybe, maybe not. But also, specifically for Mars and the Moon, it's not as easy to go, we want to drill there, because now there is an astrobiological significance with the Moon and certainly with Mars as well. We want to make sure we're not contaminating anything. Certainly the water deposits on the Moon and certainly any deposits on Mars. There could be, for all we know, there's bacteria or even fossilized bacteria on Mars. So if you're just going to point somewhere and go, oh, that'll be a good place for a drill, no, not quite, not yet. You know, we were very specific on how the mole was going to sift through the ground and be careful about it. But if you were gonna, if we know where the water is, so if you wanted to drill where the water is, then that's going to be a completely interesting issue. You still need to figure that out.
right. Well, there's a comment here, another comment, and I really felt your enthusiasm come out. I mean, we know that you love this. Okay, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. And Jeff Wise says, I loved how much she enjoys this subject matter. So I think that's something that you covered a lot of material. You made it very, very interesting, and you explained it, I think, in a way that anybody could understand. And so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Caitlin. I really appreciate you being here. We'll have to have you back again sometime. And thank you again. Before we do end this, I don't see, it looks like we are left. I do want to give the answers to the questions.
Okay.
So I am going to share this as soon as I find it. Okay, our first question was, what causes the green flash? And I'll let you read this as I'm reading off the winner. Our winner is James Hubbard.
So what causes a green flash? It's caused by a, it's kind of small for me.
A refraction of light rays traveling to the eye over a long path through the atmosphere. It happens rarely as the sun disappears from view at the end of the day. Shorter wavelengths refract more strongly than longer, redder wavelengths.
Yeah.
I'm losing the trick. Yeah. And the separation of colors lends a green hue to the last visual vestige of the solar disk. I'm losing the black print and the black or in the green. So that is what causes the green flash. How many here? I've seen the green flash twice. Yeah, you too, Carol. Yeah, it is amazing. Actually, I've got pictures. It is amazing.
Harry, I one time when I was at the Jarnac Observatory with David Levy, we just finished dinner. We go outside, and he says, "Scott, you see the moon setting over there? You know, and Arizona has really transparent skies, and the moon setting." And he says, "I want you to watch for the green flash." and
Oh,
for sure, the green flash from the moon setting was an
oh
amazing
wow.
sight. It was.
That is amazing. I've never seen that. I've always heard you could see that, but I have never seen that. And I expected the green flash to be not to be so noticeable. And I watched it over the ocean and it was noticeable.
It's intense. Oh yes.
I just set my camera up to just continuously run and I stood there and watched it. And I mean, it does happen fast, but you can definitely see it. It's amazing to see.
Mm-hmm.
So congratulations, James Hubbard. Question 2, what are the NGC numbers for the open cluster known as double cluster and Perseus? And that is NGC 869 and NGC 884. And congratulations, Mark Helton.
Mm-hmm.
And our last question is, what is the common name for the main object that winds through IC 1396 and Cepheus? The elephant trunk. That is amazing. That is the elephant trunk. Whoops. Wait a minute. That's not the elephant. That isn't the elephant. Yeah, it is. Blah. I was reading down here. Yeah, the elephant trunk. I'm losing it here. And congratulations, Cameron Gillis. I love that picture. That is amazing. So congratulations to all of our winners. You'll probably be hearing from our president. He'll probably be sending you a congratulations letter and getting your address. So thank you, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate it. And thank you to our contest winners and all of you, our speakers. Oh my gosh, we've had some great talks tonight.
Yes.
And if there's anybody else want to say anything before we sign off here.
Yeah, Martin is been very conversational tonight. He says that I've seen the sunset twice. I guess in the same day. It dropped over the edge of the water, and then the reflected image appeared. And the Kwajalein Marshall Islands.
Oh wow,
It's cool.
that would be something to see.
Yes, yes.
Oh.
Well, thank you, everybody, for watching tonight. Terry, thank you, and
Sure.
everybody from the Astronomical League. Caitlin Ahrens, it was honor to have you on. Libby, if you're listening, thanks again for coming on. And David Levy, as always, a pleasure. And until Monday, we've got more coming. And on Tuesday, we have the next Global Star Party. I will also mention that we have we will be doing the broadcast of the Winter Star Party that's coming up February 8th, and so that's going on for several days. So that'll be exciting. And in the works is a Global Star Party that would be co-hosted by Astronomy Magazine and its editors. So I think that would be just tremendous as well. So lots of exciting stuff to come. Hope that you guys are warm and healthy, and maybe you're getting some clear skies here and there. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you again, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Night. Good night.